Let's kick it off. So welcome everybody, and thank you for taking the time and joining us today. My name is Johan Broman. I lead the solutions architect team for game tech at AWS here in EMEA. I've been with AWS for the last 9 years, and I lead a team that's really helping customers build, run, and grow games on AWS. So I'm joined today by the good folks at Incredibuild, on the topic of running faster, cost-efficient or cost-effective Unreal Engine 5 builds on the cloud. So I guess, this is a super exciting topic. And as you know, as kind of we headed into this webinar, one thought that occurred to me was that when I started my gaming journey way back in the 80s on my Commodore 64, games were typically pretty small, really small. And that's certainly not the case anymore. And as games get bigger, more immersive, more complex, game developers are faced with the increasing need to innovate. We know it's a super competitive market out there. And game developers need to bring out new content, new features, and new experiences. That's going to be key in keeping players engaged. And we say that there's this saying that game development is this weird intersection between the creative arts and technology. And with this ever-increasing need to innovate, while focusing on the creative aspects of game development, that's most people find that super challenging. So as games gets bigger, so does the development teams. And studios want to enable a distributed global workforce to work on these games. So centralizing game build pipelines is key. And many customers want to leverage the global reach and scalability and tap into the scalability that the cloud offers. And here at AWS, we've been helping customers leverage the cloud for running their game servers, running live ops of their games in the cloud. And we're seeing this trend of customers also wanting to move part of their game production into the cloud and leverage the same benefits they see on the game servers and live ops. So this is where our partner Incredibuild comes in. And to hear more about this and how that works, I'm going to hand it over to Asaf and Incredibuild, where they're going to talk about the great set of tools and services that Incredibuild offers to help game companies leverage cloud in their game production pipelines. Asaf, he leads the business development team at Incredibuild. I guess a less known fact about Asaf is that he also used to be a game developer himself. So with that said, let's kick it off, and I'll hand it over to you, Asaf.
Thank you, Johan. So yes, I used to be a game developer a while ago, and I must admit, as much as I love my job here at Incredibuild, working with the smallest and the largest game studios, I still envy those developers when I talk to them, because I remember that exciting times of developing games and adding the art on top of it, and then seeing people play it. It was really fun and exciting, but I also remember the challenges of waiting for those builds to complete and really being helpless during that time and ineffective, and just waiting for it to finish, to then realize that, oops, I forgot something, I need to run it again. And then comes crunch time, when everything is competing to just get to the finish line with good quality games, but also get some sleep at night while I have to wait for those long builds. So that was a while ago. We're at 2023, where we have the right tools, that it doesn't have to be like that. And this is what we're going to talk about in this webinar. Please feel free to ask any questions you might have along the way, and Johan will let us know when this comes up. So let's get started. So if our life is a game, and it is in a way a game, right? So level 2023 is a whole new level, and it's a challenging level comparing to others. This is the post-pandemic hangover, where everybody's now detoxicating from what they drank last night, and waking up to a new level where VCs are not in the mood of investing as they did before. I mean, bad news if you're an ex-Blizzard with a great idea in a PowerPoint that you were hoping to get to 5 million. No, it's not going to happen that easily this year. Also, with the economical headwinds, consumers are not in the mood of spending as much as they did before. And just like in real games, lots of the last levels challenges are creeping into this one. Work from home is still a challenge not a lot of studios know how to handle. And then comes all the delays. We saw so many delays in 2022. Like this one, for example, by Ubisoft. I love that image because it really represents level 2023, but I want to tell you that these ships never left port. This game got delayed maybe 6 times already, and it's not out there. And we see a lot of them. So they've been delayed to 2023. What will happen to those games that were planned for 2023? They might be delayed as well. So we see a lot of these challenges that are creeping into this level. And another one is that companies are seeing an increased cost of production. So it's no surprise that Halo Infinite, that cost about $500 million to build, is now trying to monetize. So when you start playing the game and you want to change armor, you want to change color, so many things you have to pay for. So we're probably going to see a lot of that and advertisement. So this is coming out of a CEO or a production manager who is really asking, what do I want to focus on? Do I focus on high quality in a wow game that will bring you more revenue? Do I focus on delivering on time? Or maybe should we work on the financials of monetization and reducing costs so we can stay afloat? All of them are super important. And I know you all know that it's not possible to get it all, but we are at 2023. In this level, we get some tools, right? You get generative AI to help you cut down cost and time of generating those beautiful assets. You have cloud to help you hire people anywhere and still be productive. And you got Incredibuild that will help you to add that time element for developers and the CI. So they can do many more iterations, increase quality, fix bugs quicker, add more levels, and also take care of costs, which we're gonna talk about. So in this webinar, we'll talk about how this impacts the studio, especially at that level 2023. And you're gonna get to see a live demo by Jonathan. You're gonna see UE5 being compiled at a record time that you've never seen before. So let's get started. Well, many of you know Incredibuild for a while because we've been out there for, let's say, 2 decades. But I'm pretty sure most of you know Incredibuild as it works on premise. Cloud has been introduced just a few years ago. And that actually what makes us different from a lot of the other solutions out there, like open source, that are mainly built for on-prem and not cloud. And you will also see Incredibuild that a lot of the public game companies, more than 90% of them use Incredibuild, and a lot of the smaller studios, the indie studios. What makes this solution so special in gaming is that it was born in gaming. We started in gaming. This is the majority of the work we do at Incredibuild. It's for gaming, which allowed us to build native integration to a lot of the tools so you guys can feel at home and you don't need to work on implementing or integrating it to any of your tools. It just works and it talks your language and it knows how to manage very, very specific game production workloads. So this is us in a nutshell. And the solution itself, just in a high level, I'd say that the anatomy of Incredibuild is built of 3 levels. The initiator is where you initiate builds. It could be a developer working from home or in the studio. It could be a CI in the studio. It could be a CI on the cloud. Then you have the helper agents. These are agents that are installed on various machines. If you're in the studio, it could be even my colleagues' laptops. It could be the secretary machine. It could be servers. But when you use cloud, these are very sophisticated spot machines that know how to handle their provisioning, spinning up and down, and so on. And in between, you have the coordinator, who is the matchmaker between initiators and helpers. Now, because Incredibuild knows how to take those builds and break it down to a lot of pieces, you might have one initiator initiating a job and hundreds of helpers spun up to help that initiator. So let's see how that works. This is an example of Lucy. I want you to meet Lucy, very nice developer. She's working from home today, and she's triggering a build. It's an UE5 build. And the very first thing that Incredibuild does, it has its algorithms to identify how can we break this build down to smaller pieces that are not dependent upon one another. So we broke it down to 4 pieces in this case. And then comes the build cache. We actually implemented the cache both on the developer side as well as centralized, which is actually caching those pieces and looking to see how we can reuse them. And in this case, half of the build was already built before and was cached, and there are actually 2 pieces that have changed today by Lucy. So we're actually cutting down the need for build for half of the build because it's already cached, and we only have to handle the other 2 pieces. Now, in this case, the studio really wanted to utilize first the hardware that is on premise before we go to cloud. So the very first thing that happens, Incredibuild look for available machines on premise. And you know what? This is now crunch time. Everybody's building, and there are not a whole lot of machines available right now. So some of the workload can be covered by the studio, but not all of it. So then Incredibuild goes to AWS. It spins up as many Spot machines as needed with the right sizing and settings for that specific job, with the right provisioning, because she might be working on UE5 and somebody else may be working on a different version of UE5. We make sure that those machines are ready for this specific workload, execute it, and eventually spin it all back down and kind of gluing it all together into that output binaries that Lucy needs. All in all, we've ran all that much faster, and you'll see that in the demo, and we actually shaved down almost 2 hours over time. Imagine if she does it multiple times a day. So that drives much higher productivity. The creativity of being able to add more levels and features and so on, because it gives much more time in our hands, and we hear it a lot from customers. The quality increases because she is not worried about running more iterations for fixes and improvements and perfection. And we see that a lot by artists, by the way, that see a shader compilation that runs for 2 hours, they don't want to do it again, even if they see the imperfections and they don't want to fix them because they don't have those 2 hours to wait again. So that impact quality, but eventually costs. This is very important, especially nowadays. Remember, we cut half of it by the build cache. Some of it ran on local hardware, so nothing goes to waste. And then only quarter of the work went to Amazon. And even then, using Spot machines that are half price. So we're getting to about 1/8 of the cost that it would cost you to run all that on the cloud. So cost is very important, and even Amazon really understand it, and they love you guys to use cloud and minimize your cost as much as possible. And this is a great way to do it. So that was work from home, but then we have the CI. The CI is a big traffic jam. If you're on-prem with your CI, then when you get to crunch time, you don't have nearly enough hardware. And if you do, you bought too much, you know that. If you're running on the cloud, the traffic jam is because you have so many developers and artists committing code through Perforce to your CI, but not enough build nodes. And what happens is that very similar to when you're at a parking lot that is full and waiting in your car for somebody to leave so you can get in. This is the case here. So it's not about the speed of build, it's about that queue that is building up there. Where Incredibuild has no queue, it just has no limits. You can spin up as many machines as possible. So this drives, we see sometimes a wait time of 3 hours for feedback from CI, going down to 20 minutes. And that changes the whole way that they operate. If I just submitted my code to the CI as a developer, and if it just takes 20 minutes, easy. I go make my coffee, come back, I see the feedback, make the corrections, submit, and it goes through QA on the same day. But if it's hours, I moved on to another project, I went home, context switching, and so on. And again, cost comes here because all those build nodes that you have there are probably on demand, fully priced, while Incredibuild is using the build cache and on the CI side, usage of spot machines to reduce the cost. So that's on the CI side. So I want to give you an example for a tiny company called Epic, and see what Alex is saying on stage at reInvent, talking about the massive build farm that they built there for both Unreal Engine and Fortnite. Let's hear him.
But I mentioned Incredibuild, which is a slightly different class of builder. At the time, with our MVP, we deployed static infrastructure. And luckily, as we were working through this, Incredibuild was working on this problem as well. So they actually have a feature within their product called Cloud Cores that supports dynamic provisioning across multiple availability zones, multiple instance types, and spot instance with on-demand fallback. And so we were able to enable that and leverage truly dynamic Incredibuild resources using spot instances and spot fleets. The chart here on the right is a chart of Incredibuild hourly costs, and you can see how dynamic it is depending on the day, depending on the hour, aligning with essentially the utilization of our farm. The low bits are kind of weekends and periods of low utilization of the farm, and the peaks are midweek, right, at periods of time where lots of changes are being submitted.
So I want to pause here. Alex was talking about static machines versus dynamic, and I want to talk about that because we see that a lot. And it's not trivial. A lot of studios are thinking that, well, yes, we have our peaks and valleys, like Alex showed. We have weekends and we have crunch times and we have quieter time of the day and so on. And then why not just throwing 3 machines of 64 cores on-prem or cloud? It doesn't matter, and it will take care of it. It sounds like a good and cheap and a very solid solution, but it's actually not. Let me show you why. Because your demand is not static. Your demand is dynamic, it's changing, but when your capacity is static, you will always be either over provisioned or under provisioned. I mean, it will be just like a broken cloak is correct twice a day. In a few moments of the day, you'll be exactly at what you need, but it will be just a few moments. So when you're over provisioned, that means you have much more power than you need, and that means you're paying too much on the cloud or on-prem. But you know what? I'm not too worried about it. I'm worried about the other bit. I'm worried about those extra demand that you cannot fulfill, because that really impacts what you need in this level of 2023. Because when you don't have enough capacity, for example, I'm building my code and ideally it needs 500 CPUs, but there is no 500 CPU machine, not on Amazon, not on-prem. So that means I have to settle for that 64 core machine for a job that requires a much bigger one. And the impact of that is much bigger than losing money on idle machines. Here we're talking about making our resources, our developers slower. Remember, developer is the most expensive resource in the organization. I mean, 1 hour of machine on the cloud costs $1.50. That's not how much your developer costs, I'm pretty sure. In that, regardless where you are in the world. The CI gets slower, the quality gets lower, less code iterations, and this is what eventually causing delays. So I want you to focus on this, that when you need those the power of thousands of cores, you want to have the ability to provision it on the fly by demand to your team. So what happens with Incredibuild, we're actually taking each and every job. I'm not talking about each and every build. We're breaking it down to pieces, and some pieces may require 500 cores and some pieces may need less. So we are actually, each piece is being sized individually. And even the larger ones that requires 1200 cores, we just bring together a lot of machines that make those 1200 cores, and Incredibuild is making them act like one big supercomputer. But then you have also the lull times of needing just 8 cores. And I remind you that you just provision 364 core machines, so it's way too much. So Incredibuild can now spin up just those machines that are needed for the smaller jobs. So this is a much better way to go. So we're hearing a lot from customers of taking those, for example, open source projects and just lift and shift and put it on the cloud on some static machines, but they end up paying much more. And at times of these of needing so many cores, they just don't know how to spin up what's necessary. They just use what you provisioned. So you end up not getting the team what they actually need during crunch time. Another example outside of Epic is Blizzard Proletariat. We're working on Spellbreak. That was, I believe, 2 years ago. And people started working from home and used Incredibuild on-prem up until then, but really working with Incredibuild on-prem, when you work from home, your VPN gets saturated, and a lot of other issues just by not having enough cores available to you. So they've implemented, they migrated it to Amazon, and they saw how build time is being slashed by half, which allowed them to release Spellbreak. I think that was September 2020 or something like that. But that helped them to get through. Remember that triangle of time, quality, and so on. This is exactly what they did to add more time to developers to deliver quality and time. Another story is actually not a gaming company. This is Wave are making a really, really cool concerts VR. You should really try it. I mean, they had, just for example, Justin Bieber singing from his, I believe it was home studio, and people just, you know, enjoying that concerts from home. They are purely remote. Everybody's working from different locations, and their builds are very long. And that was one of the issues they found in going with Unreal versus other engines. They knew that the build is going to be long, but the results are going to be amazing. They went to the marketplace, provisioned Incredibuild, and very quickly they saw how builds are actually slashing from 3 hours down to half an hour. And that really allows them both on the developer and artist side, but also on TeamCity side, to reduce the builds and also reduce some of the costs on TeamCity, because the cost is based on build duration. And now that we cut it down so much, then some of the costs on the CI side are cut down. But that wasn't the purpose, but it's a nice byproduct that they didn't expect. So before we go to a live demo, I just want to summarize that in this level, if you're using the right tools, you're going to help the developers to be much more productive, give them more time to be successful, be proud of what they do, do as many code fixes, levels, features as they need to do during their time without needing to work too hard. Working from home with as many CPUs and power that they need, boosting up CI speed, especially from crunch time. And finally, while not letting you pay too much for cloud, using all the caching and spot and so on to reduce that. So I really wish you all, before I go to Jonathan, wish you all to win that level very nicely. And hopefully that the next level will be much nicer with new tools. Okay, over to you, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, Asaf.
Let me just make you a host. Here you go.
Great, thank you. Yeah. Okay, let me just share my screen. Okay, there we are. So hi, everyone. My name is Jonathan. I'm a solution architect here at Incredibuild. Today, I'm going to be showing you a bit of our coordinator, which is the hub of everything Incredibuild does. And then I'm going to be showing the really quick onboarding process we have to get set up to use the cloud to accelerate an Unreal 5 build. And then hopefully, if the live demo goes correctly, we should see how the cloud can spin up in real time and join a build to accelerate the compilation speed. So if everything goes to plan, which live demos really do, hopefully we should see that. So as you can see here, this is the front page of our coordinator. The coordinator, as Asaf said, is the brain of Incredibuild. It manages your grid, it manages the resources you have, and it distributes the tasks over the available resources. So for me at the moment, I've just got my laptop here. You can see, so it's not a very, very busy grid, but we could see any task that was being done here in real time. We can see the roles that have been assigned to different machines. So for me, I've got my laptop. It's an initiator, which means it can start a build. Typically, this would be a developer laptop. It's also a helper. So a helper means it could contribute cores to a build of someone else, another machine. And in this page, we can see lots of information that you'd care about for managing a compilation grid. So we can see how many machines we have online, license information, things like that. We can also see information about the machines, last time it was connected to the grid, number of cores, how much memory is available, all sorts of information. Too much to go into right now, but it's a really good place for both seeing what your grid is doing at the moment and what's in your grid, and also configuring your grid. You can set all sorts of configuration at this level rather than logging into each machine individually, and you can select all your machines at once so that you can apply changes across your whole grid seamlessly. But the thing we're going to most look at today is onboarding to the cloud rather than any of the different options we have. So this is where we start our cloud trial. We give everyone a 30-day free cloud trial, which you just need to sign up for. It's easy, it's just a username and password login. So for me, I've already created one for this demo. Now, one thing I'd like to just emphasize before we go on with the cloud demo is that this isn't a SaaS solution. This is hosted in your own environment. The coordinator you can see here, if you look at the URL bar, it's just a locally hosted application. So we're totally leaving everything within your environment, and the same is true for the cloud, as I'll get into in a minute. So the first thing you have to do is pick your cloud provider. Today we're going to pick AWS. Otherwise, I think Johan would be a bit unhappy. Then, yeah, it's really easy. If you're familiar with AWS, it's really easy to set up integration. Our documentation goes into this in great detail, but effectively all it is an IAM role with a policy. And in our documentation, we have an example policy which has the minimum possible permissions that we require in your account, so that we can spin up instances, do your compilation work, and then spin them down once it's completed. Okay, I'm just going to quickly pause the share while I input my credentials, because I think our cloud bill is high enough as it is without sharing our credentials with the world. Okay, so now we're onto the cloud settings. I think this is the most interesting bit of the configuration. We have the usual AWS region, pick your region. I'm in London, so I'm going to go for the London region. Most customers have private networks already set up, so you can just pick your VPC and then pick your subnet, use your own security group. But for the sake of this demo, I'm going to let Incredibuild create the network for me. All it does is create a VPC, a subnet, and route tables, and that's really it. Now, I think this is the key part here. So what we can do, which there's many open source solutions which can, like distribute work across a grid, and there's varying levels of capabilities. But what Incredibuild does that the open source solutions can't do is we can manage your grid dynamically. So we can spin up instances, and we can spin up spot instances, which are cheaper instances, but that you're not guaranteed to have availability, and that can be taken away. We can spin them up, and then we can distribute your work across them. And if AWS, let's say, comes and sends you a notification saying, we need this machine for another customer on demand, we're taking it away in 1 minute. If you were just running your build on a 128 core machine spot instance, and you were an hour into your build, you'd lose that build, and that would be a nightmare scenario because you've just lost an hour of computational work. Incredibuild doesn't have this problem. It will take the tasks and it will go, okay, we're about to lose this server. We're going to move the work over to another server, and maybe you'll lose a task that's in progress, but it's only a small thing, and it's invisible to you as a user. And we can show you that in the demo, which comes in a minute. I hope that's clear. So we pick a machine type. I think 16 cores is quite reasonable. SSDs we recommend because it speeds up the boot time of machines. The idle timeout, this setting is important because every machine, once the job is done, you can set it so it immediately disappears, or you can leave it online. Let's say if you had many developers in the morning, they log on, they pull their latest changes from their repo, and they have to do a full build to get their working environment up to the latest version. You would perhaps allow a longer timeout so that machines, the cloud machines, are available for the work rather than immediately turning off. And that way you could have quicker builds because they're not waiting about maybe 1.5 minutes for the servers to come online. Total storage size is just the size of your EBS volume. Unreal Engine's a really big build, but 128 gig should be fine for this demonstration. Here we have maximum number of cores. So 160 cores is a fairly standard number of cores to add to a build. We have seen customers go for 1,000 or 2,000 cores for an Unreal build, but in this case, we're just going to go for 160. And the pool size is the number of machines which will remain stopped in your environment so that they can be turned on, as opposed to terminated once the build is done. This means you just have machines that come online a bit quicker, okay? So if you keep a large pool, you'll be paying for the EBS volumes because even a stop instance, you're still paying for the EBS, but you'll have quicker builds on average. Another feature that I didn't mention was that we can fall back to on-demand machines. So if the spot instances are unavailable, which is actually quite a rare scenario, but if they're unavailable, we can let you decide, okay, I want to fall back to an M5, an M5A, a C5A machine on demand. So your workload is going to be done no matter how available the spot machines are. And it will be done at the cheapest possible price because we're going to use all the spot machines that are available. And then once those are exhausted or no longer available, we then go to on demand. So you're getting the best value possible for your builds.
Just to add there, I think that's really key, right? Because you could leverage essentially the spare capacity that AWS have and that, at a much lower price point, whilst relying on demand and fall back to that if needed, right? And kind of giving you the best of both worlds without having to like manually configure how this is handled, right? It's all handled by Incredibuild in this case. Just Jonathan, just a super quick question, because I think you mentioned that this runs in your own AWS environment. So is this like a complex thing to set up, and how is it something I can quickly kind of try in my own account if I wanted to?
Yeah, so it's really easy to set up. It's literally an IAM role and a policy, and then just going through these settings, you just input the ARN and the external ID. But if you want to try it out, we have a free trial on the marketplace. It's an unlimited 30-day free trial. So it's worth giving a go and just seeing how it does for your builds, seeing what acceleration you can get. So it's definitely worth a try. Yeah, sorry, Saf, did you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask if this what you just showed, is this setup that every developer set or for every job, or this is only once you set up and the environment and you leave it with those settings moving forward?
Yeah, good question. So this is something that you set up once. Whoever's installing Incredibuild will set this up. You can modify the settings at any point, but developers don't need to really think about any of this. They just run their builds as normal, and they'll just see acceleration. So their builds will be done a lot quicker. Their machines will be a lot more performant because they're not so burdened by the heavy task of compiling Unreal Engine. Yeah, to them it's largely invisible, although they will see a build monitor, which I will get to later, which will show them how the workload is being offloaded to these cloud cores.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so We have some other settings. I won't go into every single setting because there's quite a few. But one interesting one, I think, from a cloud perspective, is tagging. If you're in FinOps or you're just generally interested in keeping an eye on how you're spending on AWS, which is always important, you can tag your machine so you can know exactly how much you're spending in virtual machines on AWS, because it's all done in your environment. So the virtual machine cost, the EBS cost, it goes onto your bill. We're not involved. We don't touch your data. It's just totally in your environment. And this way, it's easy to keep track of them. Okay. So that was basically it. And now we just click Enable Cloud. We agree to the terms, and there we are. We're off to the races. And this takes about a minute. It's just activating the cloud. It's deploying the VPC, and oh, there we are. Okay, that was quicker than before. And now I'm going to try a Unreal build. So this build is, I'm going to build the Unreal development editor from source. So I tried this earlier on my machine, and it took about 2.5 hours. Now, in this 2.5 hours, my machine, you could hear the fan whirring. It was getting warm. It really was slowing down my machine. It was really not very fun to work on my machine at the same time. And this is because it's all the cores are being fully used to do this compilation. Now, Incredibuild can help us offload that. And in a minute, we shall see how it does that with the build monitor. But before we see, please.
Yeah, just a quick question, just to reiterate, and maybe I missed it, but as a developer, do I need to change my code or anything to make this work? Or
yeah, that's a really good point. So actually, especially with Unreal Engine, you don't have to change anything. Even using, there is literally nothing. This is an exact same build. You go into Visual Studio and you click Rebuild Your Solution, and because of our partnership with Unreal, it's totally integrated. So it will detect, okay, Incredibuild's there, start distributing the workload. Okay, so it's really easy to use. So
Jonathan, what about homegrown engines?
Homegrown engines, yeah. So if it's C, C++, we can distribute it. To do those engines, all you need to do is wrap your existing build command in an IB console.exe command, and it's the same thing.
Cool.
So it's one more step on top of your regular process, but that's all. There's no heavy lift to integrate at all. Mm-hmm. So one thing I'd also like to say is as a developer, typically when you're doing a compilation, all you see is the command line returning, it just reads at you, and it's really difficult to understand exactly what's going on. So it's difficult to tell, okay, where is this compilation occurring? Which cores these steps on? Are there dependencies that need to be a task's dependent on other tasks that perhaps shouldn't be? Whereas the build monitor, it really gives you a good visualization of what's going on. So if this is correctly working, which being a live demo, of course, it's going to throw an error. And now you get to watch me sweat a little bit. Let me just restart this build. Okay, so yeah, as a developer, you're typically, this is what you see when you're compiling, and it's really difficult to understand what's going on or to pick out particular errors. Whereas the build monitor, it gives you a lot more information. So here is a one-step task I had from before while we're waiting for this one to come up. And it gives us lots of information that would be relevant for doing any sort of compilation or distributing any workload. So the most common tasks we looked at here are ready tasks, active tasks, and assigned CPU. Okay, so we can see that for this task, it was only one task, and it was one-step task. So that's not super interesting. But if you had, let's say, 1,000 ready tasks and 8 active tasks, that would imply that you could add up to 1,000 cores to your build in parallel and distribute the work much more quickly than just running it on one 8-core machine, let's say. So we can give you that level of information into your builds that perhaps is not always visible when you're doing it through the command line. And we're getting an error, of course. Okay, in which case I'm going to quickly switch to another build just to give you an example rather than trying to debug my terrible Unreal Engine code in real time. Bear with me.
Yeah, the joy of debugging in real time, right?
Yeah, no pressure.
And while you bring it up, I'd say that during the POC, since Incredibuild, you get Incredibuild for free for a period of time. This is the time where you kind of play with, you run the build, you benchmark, you see how many cores it actually needs. So you really get ready with the parameters you need that are specific for your studio.
Okay, so this is one I did earlier before I broke my own code. So we can see here that I was initially just building on my own laptop, 8 cores, and this is just using all the resources of my laptop. Now we can see if I select system graphs, we can see that at the moment it's got 72 tasks it could do and 8 tasks active. So we could add more cores. We know that already. That's visible. Now, after about 1 minute, we tend to see the cloud servers come online and join a build. So, okay, there we are, you see. What happens is in real time, the cloud servers come online and they start contributing to the build. Now, this is really seamless. You can add more cores, you can remove cores. Incredibuild is really robust when it comes to making sure your build's completed without failure. So another thing I'd like to add is that this is really good if you have a hybrid environment. Let's say you've gone and you've spent some money buying servers for your on-prem environment and you want to use them, but sometimes, let's say there's a release, you want additional capacity to really get your speed up. Incredibuild will use your on-prem servers already, and then only then, once those are used and utilized fully, will it start spinning up additional capacity on the cloud. So you don't waste a thing. You're not losing any value out of the money you've already invested, but you can also gain additional speed on the cloud. So actually, we did some maths a bit earlier today, and we found that this build, which is taking a 2.5-hour Unreal build down to 40 minutes with 160 cores, it costs around $6.30 for that build. So as a developer, you are gaining a bit under 2 hours of time, and you're able to develop quicker for just $6. Your machine is more usable. You can carry on working on other things. You get better feedback. It's quite I think a positive investment. One last thing I'd like to add is we've seen a lot of customers recently using one of our settings, which actually distributes all the work from their laptop or their PC to the cloud. So here you can see we were doing some work and these green tasks could have been done by the cloud. We have a setting which will distribute everything off the machine, so your machine is unencumbered by your Unreal compilation, except for certain tasks like linking, which have to be done locally. This is a really nice way of using the cloud because your machine's totally usable and you get the benefit of a quick compilation nevertheless. So that's a really nice use case. That's really all I wanted to show. I'm sorry that we had a little error. I shouldn't be playing around with my my poor C++ before I do a demo. And if you'd like to give us a go, like I mentioned, pop on over to the marketplace. And if you have any questions, please feel free to either drop them in the chat now or email them to us later if you think of anything. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for the demo. super cool to see how seamless that is, right? And how well integrated it is, and what you talked about, leveraging spot fleet capacity, right, as well, and scaling out your builds to really improve that, time it takes to iterate on, whether that's new game features or content that you want to bring out. So let's see if we have any questions. I don't think so in the chat. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat. Happy to answer them now. And also, I think one key point that you mentioned, right, the availability of Incredible through the AWS marketplace. The fact that you are in full control of this, you spin this up within minutes, you go into AWS marketplace, you deploy Incredible into your own AWS account. You're, again, as you said, you're in full control of that deployment, and makes it super easy and quick to deploy and try out. And that stuff, I think you mentioned there's a 30-day free trial as well if you want to give this a spin. So highly encourage you to do that following this webinar. So I guess that's it. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to learn how you can accelerate your Unreal Engine builds, leveraging Incredible on AWS. Thank you all.
Thank you.